to another Unreal Engine tutorial. Today we're going to talk about user interfaces, particularly ones that revolve around a HUD. Because when we hit play now, our screen's a little bit bare, and as much as that is kind of nice, we might want to let the player know how much health they have at some point, or potentially what level they're up to, or how much stamina they have, the usual stuff. So we're going to lay the groundwork to get that up and running, and by the end of this video, we should actually have our health up there ready to go for the player to see. So we're going to create a new folder. With content selected, I'm going to right click over here and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it user interface. You could call it UI if you wanted. You could call it widgets if you wanted, because when we pop into this folder and right click, we're going to come down to user interface. And what we're technically creating is called a widget blueprint. We're going to call it a HUD and then underscore player. Double click and we'll be greeted with this screen. So this is the UI. This is what we will draw to the screen, but we're going to have to tell it to draw to the screen. To do that, we're going to drag on this tab and attach it up here. We'll close some of these other things as well. And lo and behold, we actually need Hero, but just in case you're starting this on a fresh day, click on Blueprints, go to Core, and then open up our Hero blueprint. Scrolling to the top, our event begin play suddenly becomes needed. What we're going to do is type in create widget. We're going to attach said widget to the event begin play. So this will happen as soon as our character is spawned. The class will be a player HUD, and our owning player will be our player controller. So we'll get player controller and plug that in there, and I'll also straighten them up. So at some point in the future, we are going to need a reference to this. We'll just move over these weapon variables here, because we will need to reference the HUD and the HUD will need to reference other things. We're going to turn this into a variable. Right click on return value, promote to variable, and we're going to call this reference underscore HUD. Once we've done that, now we need to add to viewport. Right there, it's trying to give us that variable, but we don't need that one. We have our own, thank you very much. And that will draw it there. If I hit play right now, you won't see anything because our HUD is empty, but later on when we hit play, it'll appear. So compile and save that. And here we are inside our HUD. So it takes a few rounds to get used to how this works. You're going to have to play with things, but the short and fast way is, yes, you could absolutely just drag any of these elements up here into here and they would appear. But if you want it to look nice, if you want it to look decent, and most importantly, if you want to take advantage of Unreal Engine's scalability so that it fits on any screen, then you're going to want to put some time and effort into creating these. So first of all, let's switch over our screen size so we can see what we're doing. The old trusty 1080p. I've recently seen a Steam survey which said that most people are playing at 1080p still, so that's all good. We'll run with 1080p for now. So in the case of a health bar, that would be a progress bar. So we're going to drag a progress bar in, and there it is. This is the default size of a progress bar, and we can change that default size up here. So if I want it more on the X, less on the Y, let's just make this for reference now, just to get started. 250. Cool. We have position X and position Y, as you can guess, and alignments. So for example, right now it's centered to its top corner. So if I change that alignment to say 0.5, then when I tell what position to be in, it's referring to the center of this as opposed to a particular corner. So what's really important about user interfaces, about these widgets, is their anchor point. You can see this little sun here, the star over here. This is our anchor point. When the screen changes size, this is what the reference for this widget will be. So in this case, this is fine. We can use the top anchor point. But if we come over here to the very top and click on anchors, we can get different anchor points. For example, a crosshair would be anchored in the center, but our health bar, depending on where we want it, will be top bottom. So I'm going to throw this on the top. And you'll see here that our position is changed to try and reflect that. So every time I'm adjusting my position, it is in reference to the anchor point. So I'm going to hit 0 on the X, which will put it right in the middle. If the alignments here weren't 0, let me just change this to 0 again, then you can see that its alignment is using the left-hand side here to align, and thus the left-hand side of the widget or the element is in the center. But now when I change to 0.5, now that's the center. Now, why is that the center? Most elements inside of this editor have a value between 0 and 1. Not a lot of them will deal with any larger numbers, except maybe when we're dealing with positioning. Speaking of which, we'll just drag this to the top. If we 0 this, it will actually anchor with this border, which will cut some of it off. So let's make it 50. Bring it down. So if I come down here to the percent, this is the value of said percentage bar, progress bar. If I was to drag on this value, you'll see here that it's going up in decimal places. It's not going up 1, 2, 3, 4. It's always on the point side. So now this is a full bar and it's blue. If you come down to the appearance tab here, this is where we can change the color. And if I click on that, it will give me this color wheel and I can change it accordingly, or I can put in very specific values. In this case, I'm going to go 1 on red, again, decimal places. I'm going to go 0 on green and 0 on blue, and the alpha, which is how see-through something is, for those who aren't familiar with alphas, will be 1. So not see-through at all. There we go. Now, because it's a health bar, let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's go for 500. So this percent here isn't going to be what's representative of our health, though. For that, we need to attach this percent to a value. And to do that, the official term is called a binding. We are going to bind this health bar to a variable. You can see over here, we have a binding menu. And if we click this drop down, we create a binding. Now we're in a blueprint graph. Now, just to show you where we've been sent to, this right here is our standard event graph for this particular widget. It is a blueprint after all, so we can use blueprint scripting to create things inside of it. Where we were before is the designer. So by creating a binding, it's put us over in the graph, and you will notice up here that it's put us in this get %0 with a lovely little F, which leads brilliantly into my next point. Every binding will be a function. So here we have our function. We're going to rename this F2 to get health, because we want this function specifically to get health. That function is binded back here as we specified. The name has updated, and this is where we're going to set our value. We don't need to call the function from the event graph as we would in a standard blueprint. So back over in get health, what we could do to get our hero here is cast, and we can do that every single time we have a function. However, what we're going to do is create a reference. That reference will be created in our event graph. Let's grab the event construct, a slightly different name for event begin play. We'll get rid of the pre-construct for now, and we'll get rid of the tick. We can always call them back if we need to, and we'll center this. So when we start, we will get player character, which is a reference to us. We'll drag off and cast to hero. And right click on that and promote that to a variable and call this reference hero. So now that we have that reference, we'll compile and save, pop over to get health and drag in reference hero. Get that. And here we can get our health value. We'll get health actual. We can just plug that in, right? Well, no, we can't, because our health value is actually 100, which is 100 times more than the scale that this widget blueprint wants to use. So what we need to do is divide that health variable to get back to that decimal place. So if we drag off that and press our /, we can get a float divided by a float, and we can divide by 100 so long as our health's maximum value is 100. And you might be able to see where I'm going with this. If we're making a game where we level up our character, we can't have a hard and fast value here. Well, luckily I thought of this. So if we actually drag off reference hero and type in health again, there's our health max. So by dividing health actual by health max, we will actually get a value within that decimal place range, which is something that our widget blueprint can understand. And now our health should be represented on screen. So let's compile and save that. We've already typed in the script to get this on screen. So when we go over to test and hit play, we get a health bar at the top and it's full. So we'll pop back over to our hero and plug in our H value here so that we can get an idea of what it looks like when we take damage. So here we'll set health actual to a random floating range, or in this case, I actually want to see how it looks in subtractions of 5. So I'll go subtract float by float, and I will subtract by get health actual. And I want to subtract by 5. Again, this is just so we can test because we already have an effect health. We just don't have anything to shoot at us or hurt us yet. So I could call that variable if I wanted to, but this is easy enough to see. And we're going to drag this outside of our usual scripting, which is defined by this line here. That doesn't have any particular value as far as the engine's concerned, just nice and neat organizing for us. So now when I hit H, we should subtract 5 from our health. Compile, save, back over to test, hit play, right click, and now hit H. And there our health is actually taking damage. So instead of having that variable pop up on screen in the top left as a printed string, we have our health variable. And if I come and pick up our health kit, we got 40 health from that. So our health meter is working perfectly fine. And we will come back and add on our sprint for our stamina. We'll add on our leveling when we get to that. Everything will come back to this particular blueprint here.